To continue that theme, really about light and love and transformation, I want to introduce two of my favorite people. People have been on the path of awakening for the last 40 years. They are here to bring in the light and the love and the higher teachings. Two very special people, Doctors Desiree Hurtak, Dr. J.J. Hurtak. Give them a big hand. Thank you both.
Thank you. We welcome all of you. May I have a little more volume?
Yes.
We welcome all of you to this unique experience of Ascension and the opening of the energy grids of Mother Earth.
Right, so Dr. Jack in the 70s wrote the Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, that you see here today. Yes, some of you are familiar with that. And our talk today is on Stargates and the Keys of Enoch.
This is very important because, as we know, we're going through not only the ascension of our DNA genetic code, but we're seeing in all cultures throughout the world a sudden realization that there is a great consciousness shift, an understanding of cosmic ascension. We know the classical model in the New Testament speaks of Jesus being raised into the heavens, and the men of Galilee are told by the angelic presence that he will return in the manner he was taken. The word topos is used rather than morpho or form, which means that Christ represents the energy body.
So let's look at this energy system. So is there a grid system? We can all answer that around the planet. Yes, absolutely. And I love the graphics that's going on around us as well, because that shows some of this grid energy. So Dr. Tech in the Keys of Enoch wrote about the code in everything, literally. In platinum crystal, you can find what's the tree of life, Kabbalistically.
This is a enlargement 750,000 times of platinum crystal, showing that within the structure of the platinum, there is the model of the tree of life, the Etz Chaim, from the Kether to the Malkut, the kingdom of vibration. So what we are being shown here is the macro universe and the micro universe interconnect through the symbolism and the roadmap of the tree of life.
And so he also mentioned about Orion. So what's the main Stargate around here? According to Dr. Hurtak, he was literally taken in his physical body and then went in his energy body, but his physical body was taken through the Stargate connected with Orion. And this is something the ancient Egyptians talked about, even the ancient Mayans.
However, it was not known until really recent times that we were, as a solar system, were in the arm of Orion.
Right, so here's our sun, here's different, there's Perseus up there, a Sagittarius arm down here. We are literally in the Orion arm, and our sun is really theoretically not that far from Orion, the system of the star belt, the nebula, and other aspects.
And perhaps this is illustrated in ancient Egyptian and Greek glyphs of the hand being raised in salutation, representing the arm of Orion.
And that might be why we are being visited so often, and maybe for thousands and thousands of years.
But in addition to this, I was taken to the realm of Mintaka, Anotak, and Analam, which in Aramaic and Arabic represents the belt of Orion. This is very important because it reappears in the archaeological areas being presently investigated, from Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia, Turkey, to areas of southern Africa.
So let's go on to really understand that power of the grid system that exists everywhere.
Evolution is multidimensional, and as our work with Stanford Research Institute scientists have shown us, the greatest breakthrough that has taken place in the 20th and 21st century thus far has been the realization that we are multidimensional non-local beings working as a membrane between grid systems of vibration. We are beginning to explore what I will call the sacredness, not only of sacred geometry, but acoustical physics that allows us to understand how we are participating in multiple levels of reality.
So if Orion is our best and closest Stargate, that doesn't mean the only significant place in the area, but it's a Stargate that takes you into other dimensional realms. Where does that connect to the Earth? Well, the Earth, according to the Keys of Enoch, and this is back in the 70s, and this is the PowerPoint problem that is coming up, I think, has not only natural time warp areas, and Michael Tillinger talked about those time warp, that vortex points and time warp areas are all connected. I'm going to make that this time.
But also we have artificial time warp areas or time doors that have been used historically by cosmic intelligence to update the human race. In my experience, I was given a mental scenario of several pictures, one of which was this map of the world grid system, marked by pyramidal centers of energy that expand not only the last 6,000 years, but go back tens of thousands of years before.
So in addition to that, there's natural and artificial time warps. That means areas that have been sacred for generations and ages, no matter where the planet is. One of these.
So I mapped this out in 1973 with this map, and it's this interesting distribution of what we find in the Old Testament book of Numbers, according to the tribes of Israel, that represent the distribution of different dimensions of the human race in the story of the Exodus. And so we have here in the numerical understanding of the 12 tribes, or the 12 distribution places coming eastward from the pyramid zone of the Exodus, where there were historic areas of a cosmic update that took place. Here we have the fulfillment of that map that has taken place since 1973. For example, in Indonesia and Isle of Flores, we have the Homo floresiensis. In 2003, we have also findings by Russian scientists in the area of Kungrag, which is in Uzbekistan next to the Ural Sea, of ancient communities that use sacred geometries. We have references to the huge giant footprints,
right, this is very
over a meter and a half in length,
to Adam's calendar.
In southeast Africa. We have references and verifications not only in the islands area of the Azores, but also in particular areas of North and South America, as we illustrate here.
So we're going to be showing you some of these grid points. So again, they align with the Stargates. They were created on behalf of that. This is one of our more recent books on Giza's industrial complex, because the Great Pyramid is a key vortex point. It's also its own Stargate that links itself directly, and this is something the Keys of Enoch talked about in the 1970s, to Orion on one side and Alpha Draconis on the other.
What is important here is, though, that there is electrical power and gas generating systems underneath the pyramid. And so the last 40-some years of our lives, we've been working under the ground in Egypt, off the coast of Taiwan and Japan, under the ocean, as well as in areas of Latin and South America, looking at underground city structures according to the grid map that Enoch showed me, one of which was the water
conduits,
hydraulic system underneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. When the Nile River was much closer to the Great Pyramid, the Egyptians were able to engineer a very unique circulatory system for hydraulics as well as for commercial reciprocity up and down the Nile.
And pyramid means fire in the middle. And that's what we feel it really was, an energy vortex point that was activated using water, much like the technology we're starting to develop today, and also using certain types of hydrogen energy. That's
It's one thing to hypothesize this, it's another thing to get permission to do the actual research. So it took us many years to get the official documentation so that we could bring geologists, archaeologists, culture historians, linguists, and musicologists, to each of one of which is here in the audience this afternoon, Alan Howarth, who did the music for Star Trek, who worked with us. And here we see one depiction of Horus, one of the symbolic teachers of the ancient Egyptians, pulsating different color geometries from the what we will call the higher sphere of light, representing the overself or the high self that's communicating on a higher wavelength.
Exactly. So if we're going to be in touch through Stargate connections with higher realms of intelligence, higher beings, what are they going to do? Well, in one case, they're going to take us into other realms, other information. They're going to actually send us information from these higher realms. So here we have a picture, an ancient picture, that shows that we received information. Look at this, it's almost like in the form of flowers. Great energy of love, and we'll say the cosmology. Look at a flower. I mean, the sacred geometry is there in every leaf and petal.
Connected with the opening of the lotus, the central geometry of birth and rebirth, and also connected with these strange geometries of the lower part of the picture, which represent in our calculations different geometric forms of the Bohr atom. Here is a picture, if we can lower the screen a bit.
No, they can't.
You will see my hand pointing to the lid of the Osiris tomb. We were the first to uncover this in January of 1997, 2 years before Zaihawas took credit for it because we were not given permission to excavate the tomb of Osiris. But Osiris is important because in Egyptian cosmology, he was the one who brought the art of music to the earth. He represents the Proto-Christ, the concept of rebirth and ascension. So our work has been to correlate the Old and New Testament with the other documents of antiquity in the Far East and the Near East, showing that this was a cosmic understanding, that we were here as incarnate beings to go through cycles of incarnation and ascension.
Right, and so this is 100 feet down on the Giza Plateau.
120 feet.
Yeah, connected with the middle pyramid and the area of the Sphinx. So
what is important here is our small handheld laser devices we had to bring down with special cables because there was no way to go so far deep underneath the pyramids, where we then found water systems.
So let's take another look and let's get the vibration of why this is so important. Here you have the mothering elements, and you have the Ankh, which is the center for life. We can make sense of this now today, but you can see that really life was also eternal life. They understood that. It was like a power movement that not only were they giving life for this planet, but we believe as the pharaohs would journey to Orion, the Stargate, that they would also have eternal life, not just for the few, but ultimately with the wisdom, with the geometry, with the music, as we talked about, for the many. And it also came through the feminine element, not just
the higher hands, however, that are reaching up for the light sphere represent a higher octave of experience. The two women represent the mirroring of 3 4-dimensional space, and so ultimately it is a cipher for higher dimensional space that is being activated as an energy source.
So let's also look at some other centers upon the globe. This is very famous. Some of you probably have seen it. Maybe some of you have even been there. Aramumuru, or Hayamarca, in the mountain of Peru. Now, if you walked into this portal, and this is literally a portal, you actually wouldn't go too far just walking in. But some people have actually walked in and felt they've actually been transported. So this is very close to Tiwanaku, and also not far from Cusco, ultimately not far from Machu Picchu. But this is really in the New World, we'll call it, not just the area of the Middle East, one of the sacred portals on the planet, and it's aligned with all the other sacred areas of that place.
This links to an underground labyrinthian system that runs all the way through the Andes. So this is a very important understanding of underground cities that have their own light sources, just like the Egyptians used what we call saltwater batteries to light up the underground portals. There's a whole science that is missing in traditional culture history.
But in this place, of course, it's really more like a transporter place, like teleporting, because you don't go anywhere but standing in that little keyhole unless your consciousness is aligned. And then, as many people have felt from being there, they've actually been teleportated consciously. You don't always have to go physically. So one of the other maps in the Keys of Enoch is this map I helped Dr. Hurtak draw, which aligns to Chichen Itza. Many people are familiar with that. It's the place where they have that observatory. Another area out closer to towards Mexico City, and then Guatemala City. And what also out here is Uxmal. So let's take a minute. This is in that kind of general vicinity. Dr. Hurtak experienced this unique light phenomenon.
I was singing the sacred names of God as I did when I received the Keys of Enoch in a light portal opener on my body. A man was taking a picture of his wife at the same time and captured in a few milliseconds the light shield that appeared. Again, this was an experience of momentarily going into a higher dimension. So there's different levels of ascension connected with the names of God.
And connected with the sacred area points of the
This
earth.
was known by the children of Israel, and this place is also a pyramidal zone, Tulum. So each of these areas are, for the most part, just interesting archaeological zones unless you have the knowledge of sacred language and sacred geometry. When you put them together with the proper tones, the pyramidal areas begin to open. Ultimately, other dimensional doors or portals begin to open. Here we have a group of colleagues, archaeologists, working with us near the area of Uxmal in Guatemala and in Yucatan Peninsula. We have investigated over 24 pyramids, and we've published this in a recent publication called Archaeologia, Volume 54, where we've shown that these structures are built on music physics, vibratory physics, and they represent the opening of energy portals for the very few who persist with the use of concentrations.
And actually, legend has it that this whole area of Uxmal was built by a magician in only 3 days. So it's a key energy point also in this grid set structure. I know Michael Tillinger earlier showed Tikal. That's one of the key points also on that grid. Tikal itself is known as the city of sound.
Recent National Geographic did a special, and they show that this area we mark with the Guatemalan Triangle has more than 64,000 structures to date. And there is a whole mapping of underground passageways. We happen to be located near one system that runs under 25 pyramids. So we have found underground portals that represent places where archaeological evidence was deposited and used for instruction in previous periods of time. One of these areas is Tula. What is interesting here are the breastplates upon these massive statues that have what appears to be some sort of gun or laser system that represents gatekeepers.
So we compare this, if you look again at the breastplate, to some of that which is found in the Middle East. Now, these breastplates were used for literally divination and for energy. So we don't totally get into crystals because it's not just one crystal. It was like a combination. But it's really bringing in all the powers of the light spectrum and the energies connected with it to energize not only the heart chakra, but also the wisdom, the mind. So this is interesting that it can be seen in the Middle East as well as in the New World.
Again, I want to emphasize that this is like a two-dimensional presentation without the sound vibration.
So at the end, we're going to get into about 15 minutes of meditation.
But if we elevate ourselves, if we can see the normal archaeological pattern, at least 4 or 5 levels representing the 5 bodies.
We just want to say how important pyramid structures are all over the world. And we've been to the Xi'an Pyramid in China. Here's in the middle of the Pacific, in the Azores. They're all over. They're out in the area of the Gulf of India connected with that. They're found everywhere in the world. And of course, many people overlook it. I know most of you have probably taken your trips to Hawaii, but there's heiaus everywhere, and those heiaus are also pyramidal structures.
So these are corresponding to the grid system that we were given in 1973. But more importantly were the sounds. These vibrations or mantras are used as induction devices to open other doorways of vibrations. So you're not there as American or Japanese tourists with cameras taking nice pictures. No, this is just the facade to the energy portal that needs to be activated. And why are there so many? Because the plan of initiation for the human race over thousands of years covered all of the major energy centers of Mother Earth.
So obviously this is a short lecture, and we only showed you some pyramidal geometries around the Earth. Many of you know even more. But I think it's also important to say that our body is also a pyramid temple. And we have within us, from our pyramidal brain cells, you can look that up or Google that sometime, to the crystalline particles of our blood and other aspects, we have that energy also within us. So as much as it's fun and sometimes important to go to the pyramidal centers around the Earth, we also are our own type of pyramid of light and energy. So
we have worked together with the leading musicians and composers of the world to show how there is a biophysical system that can be activated within our body that in turn can activate the energy fields of other co-participants. And if you have the right people, you can move stones, you can do levitation, you can enter into other dimensions. And so again, I don't want to minimize the fact that this is the science of vibration. The missing piece of traditional archaeology, anthropology, and physics is the vibratory field that has to be initiated. That takes breathing, breath control, and a certain amount of musical training. Otherwise, it's just simply an external event of some ancient culture. No, these places were put on the planet to illustrate the acupuncture points or the grid system of the human body. The Japanese and the Chinese and Oriental nations were the first really to realize the systematic biofeedback system that was there within our body, as we see here on the acupuncture charts.
And the keys of Enoch are also famous and acknowledged by Eric Pearl as the originator of the axial tonal lines. So it's important as we go through this teaching today and move into our meditation that you feel the energy, the chi in your system. But realize it doesn't necessarily stop here. The axial lines actually will bring you back out into the stars, because in a certain sense we're walking stars and we have that connection to heavenly realms. So people look at it as astrology, but that's a limitation. That's only to the 12 stars of the Mazzaroth. I mean, what about the Pleiades? What about Sirius? What about Arcturus? What about Orion? So we're all connected with that, and we're connected also through these energy meridians with our higher self, what we call the overself. We'll be seeing that a little bit later.
Emphasize also the meridians at the top of the skull and the vibratory field. So this is something that we want to emphasize again in our use of sacred language and music, the fact that we intone 12 times or in groups of 12. There's a whole mathematics involved with sacred geometry that opens the portal of the higher mind, the template, going from the 7th chakra or the 7th seal to the 8th, which is actually feeling the resonance over the head, as the disciples did in Pentecost that followed the ascension of Christ, but also the recognition that this is a higher gift of the field of the divine spirit, the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, as it was said by the ancient prophets.
So when you think of yourself, do you see yourself, male or female, like this, with this opening coming out, the activated 7th chakra, but also the connected 8th chakra? This is very important, because if we limit everything to just our physical body, as we said as our Ascension panel last night, you really don't understand who you are. You don't understand your own empowerment. But it's also not only who you are, it's who we are collectively together. So we're all linked up, and we can empower each other by understanding this aspect. And so we're going to start, we've done a lot of research with remote viewing, and if some of you are familiar with that, it was founded in this country at least at Stanford Research Institute from Harold Pudoff and Russell Targ, working with some sensitives, but they could actually sit in California and see things exactly in places like Russia, the Middle East, New Orleans, Southern California, or even just down the street.
So we just published our book, Mind Dynamics in Space and Time, which is the X-Files, of how your government spent $20 million trying to disprove the power of mental projection, consciousness, entanglement with other space-time realities. This book covers more than 200 experiments with the best physicists, mathematicians, and paraphysicists in the United States, also including 3 advisors of President Kennedy. So this is all top secret information now being made available to let you know that scientists have shown the paraphysical doors can be opened by certain higher states of consciousness.
So see yourself tuning in or plugged in to the universe around you. See yourself as being able to not only whatever is in your brain, but your brain is actually picking up on everything around you. And so basically when we wake up in the morning, we can think of positive thoughts or negative thoughts. Most people, it's easier to pick up on negative thinking.
Not think, but think in technicolor, because most people think only in black and white abstractions. It's the idea of putting your mind, as we see here in the illustration, into the colorful geometries of what is really there. Paul setting these geometries and entering into the 8th chakra or the 8th seal.
And ultimately, it's not just about the planetary consciousness. As more and more people work with the consciousness field, we're able to tap into other planetary systems, other dimensional systems, and even divine realities. And the most important thing is that you really, really know this. Some of you might say, well, I know about this, but you have to use it. You can't just know about it, you have to use it. You have to use it in every moment. And I tell people, you know, in terms of tuning into consciousness, just before you pick up your cell phone when someone's calling you, figure out who's calling you before you look. That's a perfect example of how you start developing that mental energy. Because for the most part, we have been dumbed down. We're told this does not work, but it does. And that's what we have to start developing when we want to tap into higher states of consciousness.
So here I am with Dr. Russell Targ. Our book, The End of Suffering, illustrated by Ingo Swann, shows how the sphere of the mind, like the egg of Brahma Agni, has a whirling galaxy. So with understanding of our energy futures, we can open the book and the suffering that we have of trying to constrain everything into a three-dimensional prism or time box and realize we are free to go with the higher consciousness of what in the East is the Buddhistic tradition, in the West is the Judeo-Christian. The higher Christ self has to arise, has to ascend, first of all, out of the physical biofeedback system.
We're going to show you just a couple of examples of the remote viewing studies. This is actually done by Russell Targ, who you just saw, and his friend Hal Puthoff happened to be somewhere in Colombia, the country in South America, but he could have been anywhere. And Russell normally didn't do the remote viewing. He was just the kind of the scientist taking the notes, but the guy who was doing the remote viewing usually didn't show up, so Russell did it. And you can see how perfect Russell was able to do that. It's an airport. You can see the terminal. You can see the runway. You can see the water. It was just an exact thing. And he could have been anywhere. He could have been on the downtown streets. He could have been sleeping in his bed. Could have been anywhere, but he saw that.
But this was an unscheduled stop that Harold Puthoff made on a small island area. And note the unique geometry of the airport, the runways, and the tapered aspect of the airport going to the ocean front. So these are small details the physicists, the psychologists will recognize represents a very profound intake of information.
And it can be very specific. Like this one, they actually saw someone throwing something. It was a paper airplane. This is our friend Elizabeth Rauscher was there. They had the whole detail of this particular location. And in one case, this is what really got them funding, actually, and you can search Third Eye Spies, which is a new movie out on Amazon Prime from Russell Targ. They actually had gone into a special secure site, and one of the remote viewers read the names on the files that were top secret. So that really started giving them funding because they were actually, you know, it was hard to prove anything in a general sense.
So CIA was able to trump NSA.
Yeah.
And the psychics within the intelligence community were able to show mind over matter does work, even to the small details of the names of the scientists in their code system.
So you can use this like, where's my keys? Which, you know, that's a really great thing. However, all the time you lose your keys, you can actually use your remote viewing. Yeah, you know, if you're wondering where your husband is, or you're wondering where your kid is, or the kid's wondering where his parents are, you know, these are all things, these are active gifts that we all have. We just have to develop them a little bit more. Dogs do it, cats do it. In fact, Rupert Sheldrake has shown this.
But more importantly,
and I was going to say ETs do it.
This is how we can open up the time doors.
Yeah.
It's a co-participation with our cosmic counterparts. This is how we found the tomb of Osiris. It just didn't appear on the street there on the road map. For thousands of years it was hidden. We were able to go exactly underground and find the tomb of Osiris. The fact that the Egyptians took credit for it, that's their karma. The point of it is the fuller story will come out that the teachings of Enoch represent a higher programming that was done by the ultra-terrestrials. in an area of time and space called the Golden Age of Egypt.
So I just want to say this is by just a group of people. This isn't, the last two were done by Stanford Research Institute. This is done by the Hawaii Remote Viewing Group. And you can see that literally this is just from a photo that someone was able to pick up pretty exactly on what was taking place.
And we see the movement. This is the important, this is not the body hanging upside down, it's the movement of the body. These are the finer details. Again, I want to emphasize the fantastic breakthroughs that have taken place through the Academy of Future Science and our associates with leading think tanks throughout the world. Here I am in Egypt, working with Egyptian researchers. Elizabeth Rauscher is some 6,000 kilometers away, and she was able to pick up unknown to where I was at a certain time of day, March 20th, the year 2012, yours truly walking with 3 other colleagues. There were 4 of us walking by this strange light post. Note the structure of the light sphere and the embellishment around the bottom of the light sphere at the top and the bottom. This is a very strange type of light post or lamp that has these embellishments. She was also able to pick up on the cobalt blue color of the door.
Yeah, she was in Phoenix, so that's how detailed it is, thousands and thousands of miles away. And we could have been anywhere, you know, if we say we were in Egypt, but you know, she could have drawn the pyramid, the Sphinx on that day, or anything like that, or a hotel room. But she picked up exactly where we were. So we're just showing you these things so you realize that we all have this ability. It's not some people that are more, because even Parmenides in 475 BC said, the universe is a plenum, that is, there's no gap, no voids, no place where there is nothing. And now quantum physicists say this is non-locality. I think most of you are familiar with that term. It means we are interconnected with every place, space, time, everywhere in the universe.
We have to have, however, the open-mindedness or open heartfulness that there's a vibratory resonance that connects us and that we're not just in a vacuum. We are able to resonate in all situations, a connectiveness.
So this has really been confirmed over and over and over again. Now this is something from our book with Elizabeth Rauscher. You know, many people were talking even last night about third and / fourth dimensional space. That's how they think that, you know, like I would be sending a signal to Dr. Hurtak, or if I wanted to look in Egypt and I was in Phoenix, I would send that information and come back. That they've confirmed, Russell Targ and Elizabeth Rauscher and many since then, that it's not a sending and receiving. It's instantaneous. That's what's important. It is not a going and coming back. I mean, we can still use the word sending and receiving because we're all receivers in that sense, but it's instantaneous awareness.
So this is subliminal signaling in 4-dimensional space-time. And this may be subliminal in the 8-dimensional space-time. In reality, there is a 0 distance between the points in this complex manifold. So 8-dimensional space can be described as what, Desiree?
Well, yeah, I think this goes into this. So this breaks down some of the dimensions. The idea that where you have 8-dimensional space, time is like a river. You have past, present, and future all running together. Now, according to Elizabeth Rauscher, you still have free will. But precognition does work. How many people have experienced precognition? That means seeing something in advance. Yeah. I mean, so technically you could intervene, but supposedly you intervene even up to the 8th dimensional reality. And our brains are actually functioning up until the 8th dimension at least. So we would have to intervene in that reality to change something even in the future, and theoretically maybe even in the past.
So what about the geophysical war games that are scheduled? Can we intervene? Can we prevent these war games from taking place?
Well, we think technically we can. If we have that insight, if we put that energy out, even if you don't completely neutralize it, you can actually, we'll say, you know, make it not so bad. In fact, we were at a concert. There's a guy named Cosmos here, he remembers, and there was a big storm coming and they wanted to close everything down. And we said to the people in the audience, you know, just push the storm away. And, you know, everyone was like panicking because the gray crowds were coming. And this is actually Bakersfield in the summertime, which never happens anyway. But anyway, and we pushed the clouds away, and literally the storm went around us. So, you know, you can use it. It doesn't mean it's going to work all the time, because there may be other energies that are also trying to neutralize situations.
So this is the other side. There's a movement towards mind control from the experts in Silicon Valley. the fact that we will have a transhuman system whereby Big Brother software is going to determine who makes the, shall we say, political ascension and who does not. We argue, though, for the free will, the free spirit, and the whole drama of the Christ event, and the teaching of all of the great masters who come and go across political, vibratory lines of control and tell us we are here to represent the divine and action.
Right, and so, you know, the Keys of Enoch talk about 24 dimensions. So far, string theory has gotten up to 11 dimensions, right? The keys were written in the 70s. String theory came out probably in the 80s and 90s. But anyway, so the ninth of the 24 dimensions has realities beyond our concept of the universe, but there's still non-local reality or non-locality, which means you can still tap into those greater dimensions, which is how we have information. So this is, the Egyptians showed us this.
With the hands raised to the Ka, to the other higher worlds, and of course in the Chinese traditions and the Tibetan traditions we have these wonderful tankas, so on the multiple heads that represent omnidirectionality connected with the jewel vehicles of the higher worlds.
And we're showing you this not to look at beautiful statues or artwork that was done years ago. We're showing you this so you can see yourself in these capacities. So see your face here or see your face there and see yourself having that experience of realizing there's more above you, there's more around you, you're more interconnected than you think. So on the next screen, there's either straight lines, sharp angled lines, or circled lines. I'm going to give you a minute, and let me just tell you about remote viewing. The first thing with remote viewing that anyone should tell you is that it's the first thing that pops into your mind. Don't have intellectual overlay. Don't say, well, I think this. You know, there's no thinking on it, right? If you think it, you're probably wrong. That's the key. So it's whatever pops into your mind of what it's going to be, straight lines, sharp angle lines, or circle lines, just go ahead and see it. And it really only takes like 5 seconds to see it, but I'll give you 10 seconds to maybe, you know, just kind of bring it in and feel comfortable with it.
Let your multidimensional side flow through. Realize all directions are available through your overself. And now
and if you get it wrong, don't worry about it. You know, that's not the issue. If you get it wrong, just say, you know, I need to work on this. Russell Targ has an ESP software program. I think it's free. It's an app on your cell phone. And he has different pictures, and then you can pick what color or colors and pictures. So it's something to see. Okay, ready?
All right.
Circles. Okay, so hopefully some of you got that. Anyway, just something to show, you know, we can do it. We actually can do it, and it doesn't cross. It can cross space and time. That's Uri Geller was on your TV set, if you remember years ago, bending forks and spoons. You could have been, you know, he could have been. That could have been a rerun, and people were still bending forks and spoons. So it doesn't matter. The energy is there. The energy is present, and that's something we have to understand.
So here we see the aura or the bioluminescence of the human body and the different layers, generally 5, is represented also at the kivas or at the pyramidal sites where you usually have platforms of 4 or 5 elevations. And then also in the Buddhist traditions of the Far East, the multiple heads. Again, 5 levels, representing the different energy vehicles that one can enter.
So I want you walking out of this room, seeing yourself in both capacities, and every time you meditate, and even every time you think.
Multiple bodies, multiple minds.
Exactly.
But it's not the phenomena, it's the noumena, it's the information that comes through, because anybody can have an experience and still be basically blinked into a different dimension where it doesn't translate into reality. One has to be able to bring through information from the higher states, because information is the energy field of making changes that work.
So just a couple thoughts before we move into our meditation. There's going to be 2 screens like this. It says, no good deed without good thoughts. Now that's very important. You can't do something unless you're bringing it into your head. The responsibility is ours. So it's really us to kind of do. That's who we are.
Each individual must take responsibility for what is done, but also realize that whatever we do affects everyone, as we are all linked.
This is so important. Near-death experiences, you actually have this this life review usually when people die, and then they don't feel about it from, well, like, okay, I really didn't like that person. They actually feel it from the other person to them. So what that other person had picked up on your feelings. So, you know, basically you're not separate from, when you put out that energy, it's affecting you as much, even maybe more than it's affecting them.
Number 3, what we do to others also affects ourselves.
That was the summary of that. And acknowledge a greater divinity than ourselves. That's important.
So here in the cosmogram, these cosmic pictures that we have generated to go with the higher teachings, we have the tree of life, but also the connection with the Oriental cultures, the African cultures, the Europeans, and you will see different variations of the tree of life connected with the dove, which is the symbol of ascension, but also the symbol of cosmic language, the symbol of peace.
So let's try one mantra. We like to do mantras, and this is in Egyptian, so it shouldn't affect anyone's religious beliefs. It's I am the light power, Anu Ari Pata. And because we're energizing our body when we do this, there's certain vibrations like the Om. We tried the Om for the opening of this conference yesterday, and some other mantras.
I'll vibrate it 3 times, and then if you wish, let's say it together 12 times. Why? Because this is the vibratory mathematical grid system within your body, within the earth being in resonance. Anuari Pata, 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 Anuari Pata. This is the resonant grid. You see the inadequacy of human language. It's ridiculous to take mystical, metaphysical, paraphysical knowledge and expect a scientist who's never understood musical vibration to understand the hidden trigger mechanism. You have to open the 7 seals, the 7 chakras together. This is explained in a book we've written called The Over Self-Awakening, where we explain how world cultures also have the mapping of the 12 grid doors in their monuments and their sacred areas throughout the world. And in the midst of this, we see the female side, which represents the right hemisphere of the brain, the multidimensional side, opening through the compassion of Christ.
Right, and so this is really the basics of ascension, and the book actually has 72 stages of ascension, but here's just a few. We are to activate the grid consciousness linkages within and without. So you see like the different areas of the world. Many of you have gone to that. Some people have actually done work, planted crystals, done certain chanting in these areas.
Areas along the Nile, areas in Latin America, areas in Tibet.
But it's also important that you activate that grid within yourself. So that's important. So you can actually, as we showed you, teleportate your consciousness to that point and activate it and be linked to it at any point in time.
But we also need to be aware that we are not alone, and there are those who are here to assist us, but we have to do our part.
So everyone says when they're going to land on the White House lawn. And the idea is that, you know, until we start activating who we are and make our own decisions as a planetary system, they don't want to interfere. They may interfere when things get really too bad, but it's really up to us working with them working with us together, this co-participation that really makes a difference.
3, connect with those or the one who is or are here to help, such as in ancient times, Melchizedek, the great priest scholar who initiated Abraham. He's middle center here in our cosmogram.
Or if you look up, also the face of the Christ. You know, whatever your belief is, you have to be able to connect on the highest level. You realize that there are many, we'll say ETs, even what we call UTs, ultra-terrestrials, who are here to help, but there's also that divine source. And in non-locality, you have that ability to also interconnect at least some aspect of that divine source in your life. So it's very important that we do that.
And thus we begin to see the different scenarios or the levels of vibration that we can ascend from, the 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, into the 5th, 6th, and so on, depending upon the gifts that we are given, the endowments of the divine spirits, and the initiation that does take place as we are working with different cosmic levels of intelligence. We must make the right association with those who represent the freedom of the human spirit, the dignity of the human body, and also prophetic knowledge that represents all branches of humanity, not just a few.
So we call these cosmograms because they're really more than, we can only do 2 dimensions at this point, but you can see yourself, normally you're here, but really you're here, you're here, you're here, you're here. You're finally flying, literally flying with the dove, with the sign of peace, and you're guided by the guides around you. So these are things, just put it in your mind, and hopefully maybe one night in a dream you'll actually experience this, or even shortly before we close from this room.
The emphasis, however, is the noumena, or the spiritual knowledge that one brings through, not the experience of flying or walking through space and time. That is just the initial emotional side of going from the 3 dimensions to the 5th dimension. It is the import of divine knowledge and wisdom.
And I just want to say the angelic forces are also present in all of this work that we're doing together, and they often are there as gatekeepers to open the doorways. See this as like a type of Stargate. That's a cosmic gate, not looking at Orion like a physical form, but the gate beyond the gate, going into other levels, working with the Lords of Light, working with what we would call the higher powers and authorities beyond the physical realm. So, and the Buddhists understood this, and who were all these beings in some of these tankas?
And why do they form certain geometric associations of levels? So there are families upstairs that we will ultimately connect with. As schools in the ancient Near Eastern teachings, it was the Academy of Light, the Yeshiva Or, that brought together those of high minds to supervise certain experiments on other planetary systems.
So we believe they actually understood whether it was from the inner dimensions versus the outer dimensions. Really, it's all one. Inner and outer should be linked together. That there were myriads and myriads of beings. Many people talk about the global consciousness. Well, why stop with the global? I mean, how about the universal consciousness? How about with the universal mind? And so let's take a few minutes. We're going to move into our graphic meditation because we've won several awards for our video animations. But let's also take some energy and put it to the earth. People on the earth, and you guys can choose who you want, where you want to send that
Holding
energy.
the blue-green planet in our hands, in the palm of our hands, we send love, peace, and joy to all parts of the world, particularly areas of conflict. We make daily affirmations. We make daily meditations, and now more than ever, prayer is necessary as the greatest power on the face of the earth. If we put our collective consciousness together for ascension and blessing, tremendous time doors and experiences with the higher intelligence that is benevolent can take place.
And I just want to emphasize what Dr. Hurtak said, because sometimes, you can talk to your son or your husband or whatever and say, do this, do that, and then they don't do it, and you just get more and more mad. One of the things, if you work on a higher level, work on an 8th dimensional level, actually, amazingly, unless they're really blocking the situation, and it could take 6 months or a year, but things amazingly change. I've known people who have, alcoholic husbands.
Can we go to the film? Because we have only so much time.
Well, let's do this one. This is a universal prayer because it's going to bring together. So it's a celebration of the world soul.
I'll listen tone as myself. Om
Okay, so let's join in.
World soul is initiated. You can do this through traditional practices.
Well, I just wanted to put Tara, the Divine Mother, in there because she helps to protect the earth.
But now is the time to step through the picture, step through the tanka. We'll have limited time to show this film.
No. So I just want to say, though, that Tara is important because this planet really needs our help environmentally.
It's through the divine feminine.
Okay, so we'll just
in all
go right
traditions.
on to... let me just show for a minute. We also connect with ultra-terrestrial levels.
This is one of the beings that appeared to one of my students in South America. Beings have just the head. They don't have any body because they are a vibratory envelope with a beautiful face.
And if they come here, they don't actually leave where they are and come here, just like remote viewing. They just project. So they can stay where they are, and they can come where we are. Okay, so Dr. Tech wants to move up. One last thing, because I have to throw in Ascension. So the 3 key areas for Ascension that in terms of biblical was Enoch, and of course he wrote the Keys of Enoch. I mean, there's an ancient book of Enoch as well.
And then the Christ experience is very important, as Enoch explained that the crucifixion was to show visibly the acupuncture points of the head and the body.
But also Elijah. So Elijah probably was taken up in a type of vehicle. It seemed like Enoch really transformed himself, and as Dr. Hurtak went in a pillar of light, that's how he went.
So this ability of the cosmic Christ is coming back through Christ Jesus, who showed us the model for the last 2,000 years. And even though this has been largely pushed aside and mythologized, there's a real science of biophysical attunement.
So I would say Merkabah, Elijah, pillar of light, Enoch, transformation of matter to light, Christ. And that's what the cloth of Turin shows us. So let's go right to our meditation. But anyway, just may peace prevail on earth. I wanted to say that as well. Okay, so this is our... this is from
We
Gates
see the
of Light.
grids now of the pyramidal centers of the world cultures.
So a little bit lower on the volume if we can have that, Matthew, just because we'll talk over it. Thank you.
We realize the many grid systems and the opening of the beauty of our planet. The Great Pyramids, the 7 wonders of the ancient world, stand as the more recent exploration by the Japanese, the French, and American scientists, looking for the rooms near the top of the pyramid, looking for the portals of wisdom of why this has been such a historic problem of science.
And so let us make our journey to the area of Egypt, from the Sphinx to the greater pillars of energy. Let us realize that we are walking down the same pathway as the divine programmers of this realm of life. And as we go through these stargates, the vortexes, we come out on the other side, from the black hole to the white hole, from the white hole to the black hole. Energy continues to soar between dimensions.
We connect with the microtubule systems within our body. In our breathing and our meditation and our singing, we begin to realize our body itself is a transducer, a biotransducer of vibrations coming from the greater continuum of life. As we open the doors of vibration, our perceptual apparatus, our inner mind begins to understand the eyes behind the eyes, the heart behind our heartbeat, the reality of the divine self in communion, in partnership with each of us. The sterling mandalas begin to sing to us in unique ways, and they combine to represent the planetary grid system. Each part of the world with its unique culture represents a type of acupuncture point, a doorway that can be opened. O Divine, we pray for the spark of light to understand the opening of the lotus, to understand the Psalms of Ascension that King David wrote, to understand the mystical journey of the sacred pillars of the divine faces in Tula, in Nepal, ancient gateways of India and the Far East, is representing the Adamic image, and also the great temples of creation above that we participate in. Through the power of the mind's eye, we see through the static nature of evolution. We begin to realize that evolution does not end with Mother Earth, but continues. And thus we prepare ourselves for this great quantum change, this quantum ascension process.
And so again, let us focus on Mother Earth and the places on the planet that need her healing, whether it be the Far East, the Near East, Africa, or the New World. Some of you can visualize even the area of Washington, D.C. in the next year or so, the energy that needs to go forth from there. And so let us use the Shanti Once again, as we did at the opening of the conference, the energy of peace, as we say together collectively,
Shanti, 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 Shanti,
Shanti.
The different colors representing the different traditions, the matrix of life that begins to open as we move from the Shanti through the Shekinah, the divine spirit being poured out, the vastness of creation that we suddenly understand as we look with our telescope. Wherever we look with our probes in space, we see the building blocks of creation, the meta-creation of Homo Universalis, universal humanity that we're connected with. As we tap into the different vibratory mechanisms of music and biofeedback, we begin to realize that we ourselves are a sacred temple of the divine spirit. And thus we become connected and reconnected with our higher self that we had by birth and incarnation.
Again, we go through the Stargate and cross into higher and higher dimensions. And when we do, we see beings of light energy that come forth to us. Sometimes we see the face, other times we just see orbs of energy.
We begin to understand the ancient pyramids of Central America, the ancient observatories of cultures without number, all throughout the world in a golden age that has been forgotten, now being rediscovered. And
so we realize we have reactivated the ancient vortex areas that align to the powerful stargates such as Orion. From Machu Picchu to the Great Pyramid to areas like Huaymarca in Peru, the energy activation takes place. And so let us also say the power of sending light to the earth, Gematria Gaia. Gematria is a Hebrew word for the mathematics, the perfection of mathematics that is in the universe around us, Gaia being the earth. As we say, Gematria Gaia,
Gematria Gaia, Gematria Gaia. Gematria Gaia, Gematria Gaia, Gematria Gaia, Gematria Gaia, Gematria Gaia, Gematria Gaia, Gematria Gaia.
And please do this every day to send energy to the planet.
And so doing, we realize that we are the missing piece to the temples of the world, for we are the capstone bringing all of these different directions into one higher synthesis. We become the temple of understanding when we bring together the different spokes, the different vibrations.
Whether it's
we are the Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate. We are the focal vibration of breath, of consciousness change that is now sweeping around the world, preparing us for the return of the true hierarchical intelligence. Those who will initiate us into the next stage of coevolution.
Let us take a moment to feel the vibrations of the room and people around us. You can see yourself at the center, or you can see yourself as one of the wings around the center, holding each other together, being part of the cosmic wheel of life.
Feel the compassion of the women and children, particularly those in the Sudan, particularly those in the poor areas of conflict throughout the world. We send light to these areas of cultural imbalance, that the template and the vibration of the higher harmonic may come through in the age of the divine spirit. For this is the Pentecost that speaks of. The Global Pentecost, written in Acts chapter 1 and 2, the nations of the world come together and celebrate the flame over the head.
And then we realize that we are a part of the sacred geometry of life. And we are a manifestation of that geometry. And we come out of the higher dimensions of light and life. And we become manifest in this realm of creation. to bring the energy of life, to bring the energy of unconditional love.
O divine eternal lover, bring us into the temple of your divine creation, the house of many mansions illustrated by the sacred tankas, the sacred pictures and geometries written within the very DNA, RNA of our body. Let us behold the sacred resonance that connects us with the language of light, the language of ascension, the language of the divine birth, now reconnected with the book of life. For this is the voyage we have come to share. This is the purpose of the light that has come to reside within the flesh.
And feel yourselves as the waves of energy. We are particles, but we are also waves. Quantum physicists tell us this. And if we see ourselves as only particles, we do not understand the interconnectedness that we share with all life. Feel that presence. Be part of the greater light energy.
And in the collecting of the sparks, let us feel the supreme wholeness of the holarchy that is remanifesting itself in our lives. Let us be way-showers, but also let us be the avant-garde. Let us be those who bring forth the insights to the world grid system upon which the very fabric of our life is based. The 24 dimensions, the 12-pointed grid, the 12 system that has been used in all of the sacred traditions is now before us with the vibration of Uri, 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 Uri tone, the vibration of opening the grids together.
Let us try this experience. We're going to start
Uri tone, Uri, 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 oh. 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 And so we come to the end, but also to the beginning with the dove, the La Paloma that is over the continents of the world, the language of the Holy Spirit that is being poured out to the higher exaltation of language, the names of God, the sacred expressions. This is the work that we represent. This is the work also that connects us with Astronaut Mitchell. And Astronaut Mitchell himself was aware of the vibration of Uri, which means light, in the work that SRI conducted, where major events took place that are now being understood as the revelation of the second coming of science. For the second coming of Christ also is the second coming of science. The opening of the doors are happenings or awakenings that differ from culture to culture, but the main emphasis is the divine feminine coming through. The Shekinah, the divine spirit that is poured out in the face of the cosmic Christ. We represent in our new book on the names of Christ, the pathway to ascension. Behold the star grids, behold your future self, your Christ itself, in the assembly of the sacredness. And so we say together, Amen, 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 and Amen.
I just want to mention that we have lots of music and books, and we're at our table out there, but we want to thank you all for joining us. Have a great lunch. We hope to see you later on today.
We have worked with some of the best musicians in the world, Alice Coltrane, Carlos Santana, Jocelyn Smith. We have these albums available. Alice Coltrane, before she died, did an album called The Sacred Language of Ascension. It was suppressed by the music industry because they did not want Alice, a jazz expert, to be connected with spirituality. But that work will come out along with other work. Yeah. So stay the course, recognize that this is not an easy situation for scientists to be humble. But Russell Targ, Harold Putoff we're part of the
Hurtaks
change.
have a table outside. They're also going to be on the UFO panel tonight. They're also featured in this new movie called Calling Our Earthlings about the Integratron and George Van Tassel. You can get copies out there. The filmmaker's right in the audience. So thank you all today. Great to have you. We'll see you in about an hour after lunch. And go see the venue.